Today we're going to talk about bankruptcy. Who can file bankruptcy? Can an individual can file bankruptcy? Can a small business corporation can file bankruptcy? And Mr. Peter is here to answer all these questions today. And he's an experienced attorney, and he's also an Harvard Law graduate, and he is specialized in bankruptcy law and foreclosures. He can represent clients all over America. We're going to ask him certain questions, and he's going to answer us. And please be tuned so that this will be a helpful video and helpful information. Mr. Peter, can you introduce about yourself, your background and your work experience? And we have a lot of questions for our viewers. We're going to ask on behalf of viewers.
I'll be glad to. My name is Peter Joseph. As Mr. Kaveti said, I'm a Harvard Law trained attorney. I have 25 years of practice in bankruptcy law, all kinds except big corporations. So, Mr. Kaveti, to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter. Who can file bankruptcy, Mr. Peter?
Any legal resident can file, and I can represent people in New York State only because I'm admitted in New York State. You have to be present in the district, the bankruptcy district. Like, for example, Manhattan is a district. Manhattan and the Bronx are a district. Queens and Brooklyn are a district for 180 days. You have to have either a Social Security card or a tax ID.
Can married couples can file bankruptcy together, or they have to file separate?
Yes, they can. They can either file together or only one can file. Okay. If they both file, there's one filing fee.
Okay. What are the attorney fees, and what is the filing fees for filing bankruptcy?
The attorney's fees will vary from attorney to attorney. The filing fee for Chapter 7, which is the basic and fastest form of bankruptcy, is $338. You can, if you don't have the $338, you can apply to the court for relief from that. Otherwise, you have to pay the $338. For Chapter 13, which is a different form, takes longer. The fee is $313. If you're a small business, the fee is about $1,800.
We are not going to cover Chapter 7, Chapter 13, and Chapter 11 in this episode, Mr. Peter. We will come back with more episodes on Chapter 7, Chapter 13, and Chapter 11 in subsequent interviews. However, we have more questions from our viewers.
Very good.
Why will I lose my home if I file bankruptcy?
Whether you will lose your home, if you own a home, the question is how much equity you have in your home. Equity is the difference between the market value of your home and the amount owed on the mortgage. So here I have a chart showing market value $300,000, amount on mortgage $175,000. Your equity would be the difference, which would be $125,000. So if that is the answer, you're fine, because in New York City and the surrounding boroughs, you are entitled to about $180,000 in equity. So with 125, you're fine. If you had more than 180, you'd have a problem.
Will I lose my car, Mr. Peter, if I file bankruptcy?
The car is sort of similar. The limit for the car in New York is about $5,000. And again, that would be equity. If you're renting the car, that would be fine because you don't own the car. But if you own the car, it's about $5,000, but you would add $2,000 or $3,000 because if the trustee wanted to seize it, he would have to spend that money. If you're handicapped, you have the right to about $12,000 worth of a car.
Will the court take my savings?
No. If you don't take the homestead exemption, like we said in the prior example, you had $125,000 equity, you wouldn't be taking the homestead exemption, then you would have a right to cash of about $1,200. You also have a right to 90% of the income that you earned prior to filing bankruptcy. Also, once you file bankruptcy, everything you earned is exempt. You could inherit $1 million and keep that after you file bankruptcy, because filing bankruptcy creates what's called the bankruptcy estate, and that's what is controlled by the trustee, and that's everything before the bankruptcy.
Okay. If I file bankruptcy, will I lose my pension and IRA?
No, you will not. Your pension and your IRA are exempt.
Excellent. Will I be fired from my job if I file bankruptcy?
No, you have a right to file bankruptcy.
How does it work for small businesses?
Small businesses actually have a new advantage. After a few years ago, the law was streamlined for small businesses because previously it was very complicated. It required a large law firm. Now it doesn't. The provisions were streamlined. So now a small business can keep operating and pay their creditors in a period of 3 to 5 years. Also, in this provision, the trustee of the court will help you. They will help you with your filing requirements. Also, your business must be still operating. If your business is permanently closed, you cannot use this provision. And 50% more of the debt must be business related, and they will now deal with debt up to $7.1 million.
Mr. Peter, once I file a bankruptcy, for how long it will stay in my credit report?
There was a reform statute passed back in 1975 that said the credit reporting agencies must take the bankruptcy off your record. I think it was within 10 years, but that's just has to do with the responsibilities of the credit reporting agencies. In practice, what you need to do after you've filed and the court has gotten rid of your debt, you should go on working and building up credit. And then you'll be able to get a loan, you'll be able to buy a house. That's what bankruptcy is for.
Okay. If I file a bankruptcy, would an employer refuse me after checking my background that I file a bankruptcy? Is there a possibility that employer could refuse to give me an employment?
Yes, there's a big possibility that could happen. Yes.
All right. And, we want to discuss more about Chapter 7, Chapter 13, Chapter 11. Can you give us just a little background about Chapter 7? Is it Chapter 7 for individuals or for corporations?
Chapter 7 is for both, but it's usually used for individuals. It's the fastest and simplest form of bankruptcy. Usually takes maybe 3 to 4 months altogether. And you can get rid of your credit card debt, your medical debt, various kinds of debt. And it's not good for corporations, because if a corporation files bankruptcy, Chapter 7 is called liquidation. So in Chapter 7, a corporation has no exemptions. Like we talked about the homestead exception.
Right.
A corporation has no exemptions. So if you file for a corporation, all of its property will be gone.
Right.
Liquidated.
And can you say just a little bit about Chapter 13?
Chapter 13 is known as the working man's provision. It's basically used to save your property. And that will take 3 to 5 years depending on your debt. And what that is, it's similar to the Chapter 11 I just spoke of. You set up a plan to pay off your creditors over a period of 3 to 5 years. And there's a possibility of modifying your mortgage under the court's supervision.
And there are some callers that are asking whether a student, whether a domestic student or an international student, of course they have their social security number, can they file bankruptcy?
Yes, they can, because as I say, if they have a social security number, they can file. If they have been resident for the 180 days in the district.
There's callers have been asking us whether if they have a tax debt, if they owe some money to the IRS, can that be wiped out in bankruptcy?
No, that cannot be wiped out in bankruptcy.
Right.
Definitely not.
All right. And if clients wants to reach you, can you let the viewers know what's your email address and phone number for their convenience so that they can call you?
Coordinates, as they say in French, my contact numbers, but my website is peterjosephslaw.com.